Welcome to the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum's live web discussion on diversity in the skilled trades. My name is Sean Watson and I will be your host for today. During this webinar, attendees will not use their telephones in an effort to minimize noise on the presentation. If you would like to ask a question of our presenter, please type it in the box on the webinar console. I will pose your questions to our presenter at the end of her presentation. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available to participants following the broadcast. Beverly Blanchard is the Acting Director of Labour Market Development with the Native Women's Association of Canada. The association was founded on the collective goal to enhance, promote, and foster the social, economic, cultural, and political well-being of First Nations and Métis women within all Canadian societies. Beverly will take us through some of the barriers associated with entrance and retention in the trades for this group and provide you with a better understanding of how to connect with and engage with Aboriginal women. Welcome, Beverly.
Thank you very much. Hello. I want to thank you all for showing up today and for listening to the presentation. As Sean said, I'm with the Native Women's Association of Canada, and we have a labor market development program in which we deliver training. Well, we deliver funding for training, and we also targeted wage subsidies and assist employers in hiring Aboriginal women and assist Aboriginal women in their position. Today, I would like to be able to talk to you about who are the Aboriginal women across Canada, because I think there's a lot of myths in understanding exactly who we are and where we are. So I'm going to take you through a bit of Aboriginal Women's 101 to start this program off, and then I'm going to talk to you about different ways that you can look at recruiting and retaining Aboriginal women in your workplace. When I was putting this presentation together, I realized I could talk for probably the whole day about this subject. So I'm trying to limit it as much as I can to the information I think that can assist you. When we start off and we start looking at who are the Aboriginal people or who are Aboriginal women, there are three categories according to the Constitution. There's the First Nations, there's Métis, and there's Inuit. Most people have an understanding when they hear First Nations, and they associate it with a reserve. In this case, you're looking at status First Nation. Non-status First Nation do not have an association with the reserve. Métis are usually individuals who are located in Ontario and westward to BC. Inuit in the Nunavut. In terms of the population of First Nations, it becomes very interesting when you start to break down the First Nations single identity as a registered or treaty Indian. Let me explain to you what a registered or treaty Indian is. It's an individual who is associated with a reserve or part of a treaty. First Nations single identity not registered or treaty are referred to as non-status, and they are not associated with the reserve. We have the Métis population and the Inuit. For those of you that like pie charts, this gives you an idea when you start to look at almost 60% is of First Nations descent. The population, you probably heard a lot of people talk about, in terms of skills shortage, that First Nations or Aboriginal people are going to be looked at to fill some of this skills shortage. The population as a whole has increased substantially over the course of the past 30 years. There are a couple reasons in the area of First Nations for the increase, and some of that deals with Bill C-31, in which in 1985, those individuals or those Aboriginal women who had married non-Aboriginal men received back their status, and they basically became status First Nations. In later years, there was another form of discrimination, and a new set of legislation came about called Bill C-31, Bill C-3. And Bill C-3 was basically that as an Aboriginal woman who married a non-Aboriginal man, all her first generation children received status, but their children did not receive status. And it was a reverse discrimination because in the case of Aboriginal men who married non-Aboriginal women, their children's children received status. So Bill C-3 was the change that took place. So over as a whole, the population has increased substantially, and it's got a younger population than the rest of Canada. In terms of First Nation, you can see that the increase from just between 2006 and 2011 is 22.9%, Métis by 16.3%, and the Inuit by 18.1%. So you've got a very, very young population, and the young population is located all over. So you have, in the case of the First Nations, is 50% of the population, the status First Nations, do not live on reserve. They live in urban centers or urban rural environments. So when you're looking at recruiting, this is something that you need to address. The young population is also younger than most median population of Canadian, the general Canadian population. On a whole, it's 28 years, which if you're looking at the trades, in a lot of cases, that's usually when many people will start entering into the trades. From what I've understood is that those who have gone to university and have not gotten an education end up coming back into, going into the trades in their latter years, the 28, 29, 27 age bracket. Your Inuit are the youngest population, and they have a median age of 23. Status First Nation, 26. So each age group you're going to look at, or each segment of the Aboriginal population, if you're looking at recruiting, you have to have a different recruiting message for each of the different groups, and you're also going to be looking at different geographies of where these different individuals are located. There are more Aboriginal women than men, and the age structure of the Aboriginal women, if you look, is pretty well into the 20 to 44 age group for all three. You've got a very young population in comparison to the general population, female population within Canada. There's also less older First Nations because of you have health matters, you have lower mortality rates, and there are other health issues like diabetes, violence, things that have sort of hurt the population. There's a misconception that, you know, the population, the Aboriginal population, is less educated. Over the past, I'd say, 30 years, there has been an increase in the education levels of most Aboriginal women. If you look at the current chart, you'll see that in terms of registered First Nation off reserve, you'll see that the education levels are a little higher than most. You'll also see the same with the Métis, higher levels of education. So it's important to take a look at where Aboriginal women are looking to be educated. And most of them are in the health areas in terms of that's the health, the administrative, office, business areas that most Aboriginal women are moving into. I'd like to sort of bring your attention to this chart because when I was doing the research for this presentation, I was quite surprised at the amount of trades, apprenticeship, or other non-university. In terms of, we do have a lot more Aboriginal women who are moving into the trades, and there are a lot of Aboriginal women who, and this is anecdotal information, is welding seems to be one area that Aboriginal women excel in and find a great interest in, which is a trade that they are pursuing. But there's also other trades that Aboriginal women are pursuing. There's other programs that have opened the doors to Aboriginal women in terms of non-traditional careers and trades. There is the Temiskaming Project, which was basically assisting Aboriginal women in terms of certificates for the mining industry. With the resource development sector also around communities and having to enter into agreements with Aboriginal communities, there are more opportunities for the trades for Aboriginal women. As I was saying earlier, in terms of the major fields of study, a lot of the Aboriginal women, it's business management, public administration, health fields. Part of these, I think, is the reasoning that not knowing what is available in terms of career paths and career paths in the trades and apprenticeships. I think the more that Aboriginal women become aware of the opportunities, the more you'll see in shifts in the whole dynamic makeup of the studies that they're going into. But I also think it's also important to look at the differences within the different Aboriginal segments. There are where Inuit, you also have a significant portion into the social sciences and behavioral studies. Personal, protective, and transportation is another area. So there's a mix of where Aboriginal women are heading into in terms of their studies and choices in career paths. And I think as the younger generation of First Nation or Inuit or Métis youth come up, their choices are a lot, they have a lot more selection in their choices, and they have a lot more information that is available to them, where I think the generation in the 40s were sort of channeled into different areas of business management and public administration because that's what information was available to them. So I think the more that you can get information out to Aboriginal women regarding the choices available in terms of the apprenticeships, trades, pre-employment programs, the more the selection will be different. Here's a few facts in terms of when you're looking at Aboriginal women is they have a tendency to follow career paths leading to traditional female occupations. They return to school at later points in their life. Many Aboriginal women have children at a younger age. They start their families, and they return to school at 27, 28, sometimes later. A lot of them find it different going to school with younger individuals from the non-Aboriginal population. Many of them are more prepared to put in the time in their schools. As single parents, there's about a third of the Aboriginal population that are single parents. There's also been a shift in in the statistics regarding single parenting, and there's many of children are not raised by lone parents anymore, not in the same numbers that there used to be. They're still, in terms of the Aboriginal, the First Nations community, there's still the raising of a child through family, and family encompasses aunts and uncles and grandparents, and it's not just the mother and father. In our experience in delivering the Assets program, which I'll get into further on, we have discovered that many Aboriginal women are not aware of pre-employment and skills training programs that are available to them. Many of these programs, although on the net in terms of finding them, is extremely difficult. I think some Aboriginal women too are unsure of what to look for in terms of finding some of these programs. The whole area of trades as a career choice is also not readily known to them. Many of the individuals that we have funded for our program, we are funding last year university. We're funding training programs in college. In some cases, we have funded hairdressing and aesthetics. We have a variety of areas. When I was looking at our own stats, there is only one person that we funded for a trade last year. And we can only fund people if they come to us, and if we also know of the availability of jobs that are out there. In terms of the Aboriginal population, many are in the service-producing sector, and that's where you get it back into the healthcare, social assistance, the educational services. Although there is more of an upswing coming in terms of the resource development sector and the mining and oil and gas in terms of jobs, there is not a lot of movement of Aboriginal women into these areas. And as an assets holder, NWAC would like to see more emphasis placed on how we can assist Aboriginal women into getting into jobs that will provide them with higher incomes, because we believe that will assist them in making better choices. When recruiting, people have a tendency of looking at the whole of the Aboriginal population as one homogeneous group, and it's not. There's various nations within the First Nations, there are various cultures and customs. As an example, I, as an Ojibwe, will work with an herb called sage to do cleansing or when doing prayers, where out west they don't use sage. They use other ways to do cleansings. So in some cases it's smokehouses that they do their cleansings that way, or there's also the sweat lodge. There's each culture, each nation has different culture, and it also has to be understood that you're going to need a different recruitment strategy depending on where you're looking to recruit, because there's also a big difference between rural areas where, or rural fly-in communities, if you're looking at recruiting from these areas, and rural urban areas. For instance, my reserve is within 5 miles of the city. That it's an urban center. So you would have a different strategy for working with my reserve than you might have if you were looking at a fly-in community where you had to fly in and work with the students. You're also going to have a different type of recruitment strategy if you're looking at Métis, because once again you've also got a different culture. So your strategy will be different in terms of the different types of events or the different messaging or the portrayal of individuals. You need to use a variety of role models when you're looking at doing advertising, or when you're looking at the creation of posters or videos. It's important to understand what culture matches what segment of the Aboriginal population. It's the same for Inuit. You'll have very different ways of approaching the Inuit in terms of working with the various communities that they have. When you're recruiting, there's a lot of importance in building community networks and relationships within the community. One of the organizations that is in the urban center that is very good is the Friendship Centers. The Friendship Center network is right across Canada, and they basically have programs that target youth, that target women. They have cultural programs, and in many cases you can work with these organizations and they can assist you in having recruitment seminars or events. If you're looking on a larger network level, you'd also want to be working with organizations like the Aboriginal Human Resource Council. They are an organization that has an inclusion network. Very important to tap into the organizations, the Aboriginal organizations that are out there, because these organizations are there and can assist you in your recruiting programs. As I've already said, one of the programs that is very important to look at in terms of recruitment is the Aboriginal Skills and Employment Training Strategy. There are 84 agreement holders across Canada who deliver this program. We are currently at the 5-year mark of it, and it is due to sunset in March 2015. But having been around these programs for over 25 years, I believe that there'll be another program which will replace the Assets program, and whether it'll be similar in delivery or not, I'm not quite sure. But the Assets program that we deliver through NWAC is a $2 million program that we have 10 sub-agreement holders across Canada with our provincial territorial member associations. Each of these member associations delivers the program and provides Aboriginal women with training dollars. We pay educational institutions the tuition. We also provide living allowances for Aboriginal women in training, or we provide supports. If an Aboriginal woman needs work boots or work clothes, we will pay for those. We also do targeted wage subsidies, where we help to provide Aboriginal women with training. Our program operates across Canada, and we have partnerships and are actively looking for partnerships with employers, with educational institutions, and others who can help further our cause in terms of ensuring that Aboriginal women are brought into higher income jobs. Generally, our funding is done, like I said, through the provincial territorial offices, and we at headquarters administer the program, but we also have our partnership coordinator who deals on a national basis with partnerships and developing partnerships. And so we've been looking at partnerships with Securitas, which is a security company, Greyhound, bus lines. CAF is one of our best partners. And we have the mining industry human resource. We have ATS, which is a private sector company in which we provided targeted wage subsidies. I can only say that, you know, like the Assets program is a very, very good program. And if you're looking at assisting students in getting funding for an educational or assisting students in getting funding for training, then you need to check out the Assets program. Another area that you can look at for recruiting is to attend the Aboriginal career fairs and events, and there's lots of them that go on. I think every city has an Aboriginal career fair. You'll find a lot of these out through the friendship centers who use their network. A lot of networking is done through word of mouth and social networking, which is a very big way that a lot of the youth get their messages or get information out. It's important to provide information and career workshops at community events. And in some cases, I've seen organizations and groups that have basically gone on to powwows and set up booths so that information is handed out or people can find out more information. We've also found in our delivery of the Assets program that pre-employment programs are really a good way for Aboriginal women to find out about what's available for them in the trades or in non-traditional careers. As I'd already said, there was the Temiskaming program, which was very successful in terms of getting Aboriginal women into the non-traditional areas. I think it also gives Aboriginal women a chance to sort of find out if this is a career opportunity that they're interested in. When I looked around for additional sources, there's a lot of information on the web. It's difficult, though, to know which information is old or which information is no longer around. Some of the sector councils, before they were no longer funded, had put out some very good information, which has, you know, some apprenticeship programs. There's the Aboriginal ironworkers. Ironworking has been one of the areas for Aboriginal people that has been very, very big. There's the story of many of the Mohawk workers, iron workers, and have no problem at the heights. And part of that is a cultural background in it. Also check out our website. We have the Assets program. We provide newsletters on a regular basis, and we're always looking to develop partnerships with anybody that we can. Some of the other areas where you're going to find some information is Nation Talk, some of the Aboriginal news forums like APTN, there's Turtle Concepts. Many of these newspapers, are areas that you may want to advertise in because their reach is extremely far. And with that, I would like to sort of hand it back to Sean, and if anybody has any questions, then I'll be more than happy to answer.
That's great, Beverly. Thank you very much. That was a lot of information, and as a result, we do have some questions. First of all, when you speak of funding that's available, what does this look like? Is it offsetting costs associated with upgrading and pre-apprenticeship and/or apprenticeship level training?
Actually, it can be any type of training, and it can offset the costs. It can provide the individual with supports that may be necessary to do their job. Perhaps the individual needs tools. Then we can provide those types of things for the individual. Paying for tuitions, education. We've also provided dollars for these types of things. I hope that answers your question.
I think so, thank you. Here's another question. If I was going to hold an event, are there things I should take into consideration, such as time of day and how to be inclusive and encourage Aboriginal women to attend?
It depends on what type of event you're holding. In some cases, it's important to have an elder at the event. In some cases, the event needs to be started with a prayer. It's all dependent on where you're looking at holding your event. If you're in a rural community, rural fly-in, then you're going to be looking at the cultural aspect of things that really needs to be addressed. If you're at a career fair and you're holding a workshop, then it may not be necessary to have any of this in the cultural aspect there. It's really on a event-to-event basis, and what type of event that you're setting up or trying to bring Aboriginal women to. A lot of times if you're working with the Friendship Center, they can assist you in making sure that you have the right cultural information there, or that you are not sort of doing things maybe the wrong way. So I think it's important to sort of understand what type of event you're doing. Strictly a career fair is it's a career fair.
Okay, great. Thank you. I guess the main point there is to ask the questions before you plan anything. I have another question, and that's what are some practical things apprenticeship stakeholders can do to attract Aboriginal women to the workplaces or educational institutions?
I think some practical ways is to talk about it, and to also maybe go to Aboriginal women's events. We hold an AGA every year. This year coming up, it'll be here in Ottawa. We're always looking for individuals who may want to be speakers or may want booths. I think it's important to go to those. Each one of our PTMAs, our Provincial Territorial Member Associations, also hold AGAs. You need to find out what events are out there and go to these events. You need to network. Also, you need to recognize that Aboriginal women can be anywhere, and so you can never sort of prejudge a situation when you're talking to an Aboriginal woman. As I say to a lot of people is the stereotypes and the role models are not what you're looking at in today's day and age, and I think you have to step beyond that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Next question. Are there any good programs focused on the mining sector for Aboriginal women, since you mentioned this is an area of need?
We're currently in the middle of a project with the mining sector. In the mining sector is we received funding from Aboriginal Affairs, and we're conducting a study on Aboriginal women and the resource development sector, and we're also looking at resource development sector corporations. So we're just in the middle of 2 questionnaires that we're developing, and we've also finished doing a environmental scan of the various programs and what's happening. So we're hoping that through that information we can sort of assist Aboriginal women in understanding the mining sector. And we're also currently looking at working, and we have signed a spirit of cooperation with the Mining Industry Human Resource Council, and so we're also looking at doing, we have a proposal, and I think Sean will be talking about that later, about finding out more information about what Aboriginal women need and want, because there hasn't been a lot of studies in this whole area.
Great. Thanks, Beverly. And yes, I will be touching on that proposal at the end of the presentation today. I have another question. Beverly, you spoke of the importance of knowing the various cultures and customs for each nation. Is there a specific resource that lists all these differences, or do you think one could be developed?
No, there's no specific resource, and I think in developing one it would be extremely difficult. The difference is, and even amongst Ojibways, there's differences in how the different cultural aspects are seen. And so I think you'll never get a full book. I think it's basically talking to the different cultures and asking different individuals information about the culture that you're going into. When I've done consulting for over 25 years, and so when I was going into different communities, I would basically find out from the different individuals. I'd either talk to an elder or I would do my own research in finding out what that community was about culturally. And I think it's, you know, like with today's internet, I think you can find out a lot of information about the various cultures, and the various cultures and what's out there. I do think it's kind of, there's been a pan-Aboriginal culture that has been put forward, which I think in some cases is has been accepted by a lot of people as this is what the Aboriginal culture is all about. But I think more so you need to talk with the community talk with the community that you're going into. I know when I was doing work with Inuit is very different from Ojibwe cultural values and how we operate. It's very different in terms of when I'm in an urban setting and dealing with an Aboriginal organization in an urban setting than it is when I'm going into a fly-in community. And so I think basically you just have to do your own research. And there are lots of books out there and lots of different information, and you just have to trust your gut too in terms of, you know, what you're doing.
Perfect. Thanks again. I have another question here for you, Beverly. Do you know of any provincial or territorial networks of Aboriginal tradeswomen who would be willing to share their experiences in the skilled trades?
No, I don't. I know that BC has a program in terms of trades that is, and I'm not sure in terms of their network, so I can't really give you any information on networks. We, through our study, and if you keep in touch with us, is we'll let you know what we find.
Okay, great. Thank you. One more question here. I live in Northern Ontario, surrounded by mines. How can I keep my finger on the pulse of these studies that are being conducted? And then this attendee followed up with, and how can I help?
Well, we're always looking for contacts. In terms of Northern Ontario, you know, it's keeping your pulse on anything. Is we've been looking at doing this one study, and as we're going deeper, we're finding that we are uncovering more information, or we're finding that some mining companies have programs for Aboriginal people. Some are very progressive in their programming, and some have very little programming that are available for Aboriginal people. We're always looking for information, so at the end of my presentation there is my email address, and you can send an email. And what you can do to help is, if you're interested and if you are Aboriginal, or you know Aboriginal women who would like to participate in our surveys, please have them email us, you know, their addresses so that we can get them this survey. And to date, we've only had the survey up for about a week and a half now. And so far we've had 90 Aboriginal women who have responded to the survey. And we're looking forward to about 200 is what we're hoping for, so that we have a good sort of research basis.
Okay, great. Thank you, Beverly. Another question that's come in: how can employers find Aboriginal organizations that might be interested in partnerships?
One, you can contact us and we can help you find, I'm sure our partnership coordinator, Dan Peters, would be very interested in talking to you. Dan's got a network across Canada. So in a lot of cases we work with referrals or referring to our provincial territorial member associations. We are also connected into friendship centers. Friendship Center movement is one area that you can look at in terms of developing partnerships. The assets programs, like I said, there are 84 of these programs across Canada, and each is targeted at different different segments of the Aboriginal population. And for example, within Ontario, there's the Métis Nation, and they have a Ontario, and they have an assets program that they deliver. You also have another assets program in BC that delivers with, First Nations. Our program basically is for Aboriginal women who are off reserve. You can also look at partnering with various reserves. Some of the reserves are extremely progressive and, might be able to look at developing partnerships through their economic development offices in terms of being able to recruit or get information out about trades.
Those are some great ideas. Thanks, Beverly. Another question has come in, and it is, are there tools to influence employer participation in respect to providing on-the-job work experience needed to complete an apprenticeship?
The only thing I can think of in terms of tools is and insisting an employer in taking on an apprenticeship is there's the job creation partnership that basically an employer will take on an individual over a course of maybe 6 months to a year, depending on the program, in which they will provide them with training and with the intent that when the job creation finishes, that the individual will become employed. There's also targeted wage subsidies. These can also be employed to assist employers in hiring Aboriginal people.
Great. Thanks again, Beverly. Another question from the perspective of understanding culture, how do Aboriginal women view childcare services and programs?
I didn't hear you on that question.
Okay, here it is again. From the perspective of understanding culture, how do Aboriginal women view childcare services and programs?
Childcare, daycare is a big issue for Aboriginal women because they're basically keepers of their family. In a lot of cases, daycare added to a job area is very, very important for Aboriginal women and their choices. As I said already, is you've got about a third of the population who is single parents. And so in cases where Aboriginal women can be provided with daycare, it would be a very important aspect. But children and the whole child care it's a difficult issue. I know even for us with funding is we can provide some dollars for child care, but when you look at the costs for daycare and stuff like that, it's extremely expensive. I hope that provides you with an answer.
That's great. Yeah, and I think that's our last question. If any more do come in, we will follow up individually by email with participants. In closing, the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum is interested in learning about what your organizations are doing to support the hiring and training of Aboriginal apprentices. Please feel free to share your initiatives with us. You had Beverly's contact information as well as Dan's. Also, Emily Aerosmith's contact information is on your screen now, and she's our project manager and researcher. Moving forward, the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum, the Native Women's Association, and other partners are working together to address some of the barriers that were discussed in today's presentation. A proposal was put forward to the Workplace Opportunities Labour Program. The project, if funded, will aim to inform employers about successful workplace practices crucial to hiring and retaining Aboriginal peoples. Success in hiring and retaining Aboriginal workers requires that companies embrace the cultural expectations of their workforce and provide supports to overcome unique challenges. The project objectives include identifying and showcasing promising practices relating to hiring and retaining Aboriginal apprentices, facilitating recruitment and retention by developing strategies, tips, and tools that departments and companies can use to engage Aboriginal people, engaging Aboriginal people in a discussion about effective means to attract, hire, and support them in the skilled trades workplace, and creating, encouraging, and supporting regional and local connections with bands, employers, provincial and territorial officials to support relationship building and networking essential to the employment. This project will seek to build partnerships, collect promising practices, and share findings with employers. The Canadian Apprenticeship Forum will conduct interviews, promote champions, develop an action plan, and then encourage employers to adjust their HR and hiring practices by sharing practical tips at webinars and workshops. Finally, next up in our webinar series on December 10th, we have a members-only edition of Educator Perceptions of Careers in the Skilled Trades. Findings from a 2014 CAF survey involving educators will be shared, including educators' attitudes towards careers in the skilled trades and recommendations for supports needed to engage youth. More information on this webinar or about CAF membership is available on our website. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to your participation next time.